The kitchen was dark when Marin Albright lit the first lamp. 4:30 in the morning. Wyoming spring, cold enough that her breath made ghosts in the air above the cast-iron stove. She moved slow. Not because she was tired, though she was. She moved slow because moving fast meant her ribs would remind her what Silas had done 4 nights ago. 2 of them were broken. She knew the sound of breaking ribs now. It was a small sound, like green wood splitting in a fire. You wouldn't think a sound that small could change a woman's life. She poured water into the coffee pot, set the bacon on the counter, started the biscuits she had mixed the night before, after Silas finally passed out, after she had waited an hour to make sure he was deep enough under that he wouldn't wake. That was how she measured time now. Not in minutes. In the breath between blows. She was 24 years old. She had been married 8 months. And somewhere in those 8 months, she had forgotten how her mother used to laugh. The Callaway Ranch ran 23 men through the season. Cowboys and drovers and one old Mexican who had been with the family longer than Wyatt had been alive. They all ate like the world was ending tomorrow. Marin had been cooking for them since the week she married Silas. Since he drifted into Cheyenne Falls with that easy smile and those hard hands and asked her to be his wife after knowing her 3 weeks. She had been an orphan girl, raised by Lutherans in Nebraska, working as a seamstress and dreaming of a kitchen of her own. She had thought he was offering her a life. He had been offering her a cage with no lock on the inside. The bacon hit the skillet and popped. She flinched. Small movement. Controlled. She had learned not to make sudden moves. Sudden moves drew the eye. And the eye, in her experience, was always followed by the fist. She had a way of working now. A whole grammar of it. Move the heavy pot before he comes in. Set the salt at the back of the shelf where his hand will not pass over it. Keep the knife block on her side of the counter. Never have anything in your hand he could take from you. Never let him pass behind you when you cannot see his face. She had built this grammar slow over 8 months. She did not know she was building it. The body knows what the mind will not say. The biscuits went into the oven. The eggs came out of the basket Pete Mallory's wife sent over twice a week. 18 eggs to break for breakfast. She broke them slow. The yolks were dark orange and stood up high in the bowl. Good eggs. The kind a woman with a quiet life made into something for people she loved. She did not think about that. She broke the eggs. That was when Wyatt Callaway walked in. She didn't hear him. That was the thing about Wyatt. For a man 6'3", broad through the shoulders, with hands that could break a horse or birth a calf, he moved quieter than most men breathed. He owned the ranch. 12,000 acres of grass and wind, inherited from his father, expanded by his own work over 12 years. People in town called him fair. They called him hard but decent. They said he paid on time and never cheated a man out of $1. They said other things about him, too. Things she did not yet know to listen for. Marin had spoken maybe 20 words to him in 8 months. Mrs. Albright. His voice came from the doorway and her whole body went tight. She forced her shoulders down, forced her face into something that might pass for normal, turned around slow, keeping the counter between them. Mr. Callaway, you're up early. Could say the same. He stood there in the gray light from the window. Work clothes already on. Hair damp like he had dunked his head in the rain barrel. His eyes were a strange pale blue, the color of a winter sky just before snow, and those eyes were doing something she didn't like. They were tracking, across her face, down to where her hand was still gripping the edge of the counter. White-knuckled. You all right? Yes, sir. You sure about that? She picked up the spatula. Turn back to the bacon. Keep moving. Don't let him see your face for too long. Faces gave things away. Hands gave things away. The whole body, if you weren't careful, would speak the truth your mouth had been trained not to say. Just tired, she said. Long week. He didn't answer. The silence behind her had weight to it. The bacon crackled. She kept her breathing shallow and even and waited. Where's Silas this morning? Her hand tightened on the spatula handle. Sleeping. Late night. He lose much at cards? She didn't answer that one. Couldn't. Silas had lost $43 to a man named Henley, and come home with the kind of quiet rage that only ever ended one way. The roast had been the excuse. The cards had been the reason. The truth she had come to understand was that men like Silas didn't need reasons. They only needed excuses. The bacon was done. She moved it to the plate, started cracking eggs into a bowl. 18 eggs for breakfast. Her hands were steady. She had trained them to be steady. "Mrs. Albright," she kept cracking. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. She turned. Wyatt hadn't moved from the doorway, but something in his stance had changed. He wasn't ranch owner checking the kitchen anymore. He was looking at her the way a man looks at an injured animal. Calculating. Deciding what needed to be done. "How'd you get hurt?" Her heart kicked once, hard against her broken ribs. "I'm not hurt." "You're holding yourself like you got busted ribs." "I fell. On the porch steps. 2 days ago. Those steps have been there 15 years. My mother used them every day until she died. She never slipped once." "Well, I'm not your mother." It came out sharper than she meant. She bit the inside of her cheek and waited for the flinch she had taught herself to hide. But Wyatt just made a sound. It might have been a laugh. There was no humor in it. "No," he agreed. "You're not." The door banged open. 3 ranch hands stumbled in. Pete Mallory, the foreman, a man named Marcus, and Tobias Reed, the youngest, 19 years old and skinny as fence wire. They brought the morning with them. Cold air, horse smell, the easy roughness of men who had slept hard and woken hungry. "Coffee, Mrs. Albright?" "On the stove, Pete." They poured. They joked. They filled the kitchen with noise. Pete told a story about a calf that had got itself wedged between 2 cottonwood roots and had to be cut loose with a hand axe. Marcus said he had seen a coyote the size of a yearling steer up by the north fence line, and Pete called him a liar and a poet in the same sentence, and Marcus said poet was not the worst thing he had been called in this kitchen, and they all laughed. And Wyatt was still standing there, still watching. And when Tobias glanced her way, his eyes did something the others didn't do. They lingered. They stopped on her face, then dropped to where her hand was still pressed against her side. And then the boy looked away, and his jaw went tight, and Marin understood with a cold wash of certainty that the boy knew. Tobias Reed, 19 years old, knew. She wondered how long he had known. She wondered, too, what kind of boy carried that knowledge around in his chest at 19 years old. She had not, until this morning, looked closely at Tobias Reed. He was thin. He had a long jaw and eyes that were too old for the rest of him. He did not laugh when the other men laughed. He smiled sometimes, but it was the smile of a person who had learned to do it on cue. She had seen that smile in her own mirror. When Silas came in 20 minutes later, eyes red, jaw clenched, moving with the careful stiffness of a man with whiskey still in his blood, he didn't look at her. He never looked at her in front of other men unless he was making a show of being the good husband. This morning he wasn't in the mood for shows. He poured coffee, sat down at the far end of the table, didn't speak. Wyatt, leaning against the wall by the door, took a long, slow drink from his cup and said nothing. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. Then he set the cup down on the shelf behind him, pushed off the wall, and walked out. The door swung shut behind him. The ranch hands looked at each other. Pete cleared his throat. "More coffee, Mrs. Albright?" "Of course, Pete." She poured. Her hand was steady. But underneath, something had cracked. Wyatt Calloway had seen, and Wyatt Calloway had walked away. Once again, she was alone. The day passed, the way days pass when you have stopped expecting anything from them. She cooked lunch, stew, cornbread, cleaned the kitchen, started prep for dinner. She did not see Silas again until evening, and when she did, he ate with the men and did not speak to her, and she was grateful. Grateful was a word she had come to use for anything that wasn't bleeding. In the middle of the afternoon, she went out to the cold cellar to bring up a haunch of beef. The cellar was dug into the side of a low rise behind the main house, cool even in July, always smelling of dirt and salt and the faint iron of old blood. She pulled the door open and stood at the top of the stairs a moment, breathing the cool. Ribs ached. The walk down would hurt. The walk back up would hurt worse, with the weight of the meat. She heard the dirt crunch behind her. She turned. Wyatt was standing 6 feet away. He had come around the corner of the house silent as he always came. He looked at her. He looked at the cellar. "Pete," he called. Not loud. Pete Mallory was at the corral 50 yards off. He looked up. "Pete, come down here a minute and bring up the beef for Mrs. Albright. She is not lifting today." Pete came over. Pete did not ask why. Pete went down the cellar stairs and brought up the beef and carried it to the kitchen and set it on the block. Then he tipped his hat and went back to the corral. Wyatt did not say anything to Marin. He turned and walked away. She stood at the top of the cellar stairs a long time. The sun was high. The wind was moving in the cottonwoods by the creek. She could hear far off somebody whistling a tune she did not know. A man had asked another man to lift a thing she could not lift. He had not said why. He had not made her ask. He had not made it a kindness she had to thank him for. She did not yet know what to call that. She only knew that it was new. After dinner, after the men had drifted off to the bunkhouse, she stood in the kitchen alone with the dishes. The water in the basin was warm. Her ribs had moved past, screaming into a duller, deeper kind of pain. The kind that just meant you were alive. She did not hear Tobias come in. He stood in the doorway a long moment before he spoke. "Mrs. Albright." She turned. The boy was holding his hat, twisting the brim in his fingers. She had never noticed before how much grief lived in that boy's face. "Toby? Something wrong?" He did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower than she expected. Older. "My mama died when I was 12. My daddy was a good man on a Sunday and a different man the rest of the week. The week she died, I knew. I knew the whole week. I didn't tell nobody." The dish rag stopped moving in her hand. "I think about that, Mrs. Albright. I think about it most every day." She didn't speak. There was nothing to say. "You take care of yourself tonight," Tobias said. And then he put his hat on. And then he was gone. She stood there in the kitchen with the dishwater going cold, and for the first time since the wedding, she let herself cry. Not loud. She had not cried loud in a long time. Just a slow leak, down her cheeks, into the soap. Later that night, alone in the cold cabin while Silas was still in town at the cards, Marin did something she had not done in a month. She knelt beside the bed. She reached under it. She pulled out a flour sack she had emptied and refilled with one thing only: a small leather book. The journal her mother had given her when she was 12 years old, before the cholera took both her parents in a single Nebraska summer. She opened it to the next blank page. She wrote, in the careful German her mother had taught her in Nebraska kitchens long ago, one line: "Today I have forgotten how my mother used to laugh." She closed the book. She put it back in the sack. She slid the sack under the bed. She lay down. She did not sleep. The next morning, Wyatt was waiting in the kitchen when she came in. It was not yet dawn. He was sitting at the long table. His hat was on the table beside him. He had made the coffee himself. There were 2 cups. "Sit down, Mrs. Albright. I have to start the bacon. The bacon will keep. Sit down." She sat. He pushed 1 cup toward her. Her hands were not steady. She gripped the cup to make them steady. "I am going to ask you a question," he said, "and I want you to know before you answer it that whatever you say, you are safe in this kitchen. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Did your husband break your ribs?" The kitchen was very quiet. The lamp on the wall hissed. Outside, somewhere, a horse stamped in the stable. She could feel her own heart against the broken bones. Yes. He nodded. Just once. Like a man confirming something he had already known. "How long has it been going on?" "Since the 2nd week of our marriage." He took a long breath in. Let it out slow. He looked at his hands on the table for a long time. "Mrs. Albright, I am going to tell you something I have not told another soul in this town. I knew 2 months ago. I knew when I saw you carry a pail of water across the yard and you set it down twice in 20 feet to rest. I knew, and I did not act, because I told myself that what passes between a man and his wife is not the business of the man who pays the wages. I told myself that, and I have been telling myself that for 2 months. I was wrong, Mrs. Albright. I want to say that out loud. I was wrong. I am sorry. It will not happen again. She sat looking at him. Her eyes were dry. Her hands were dry. Inside her chest, a thing she had thought was dead was moving. Mr. Calloway. Wyatt. Wyatt, why are you telling me this now? Because you are about to die in my kitchen, Mrs. Albright, and I cannot let you do that. He stood up, picked up his hat, and as he walked toward the door, he said without turning, "He will not touch you again." She stayed at the table after he was gone, the coffee cooling in front of her. And she sat with the strangest feeling she had had in 8 months. The feeling that, for the first time, somebody had heard her say the word yes and had believed her. She would learn later, much later, that this was the moment, that this small kitchen, in the gray hour before dawn, on a Tuesday in April of 1887, was where her old life ended. But sitting there at the table, she did not know it yet. She only knew the coffee was warm, and someone had finally asked. 3 days later, Silas broke another rib. It happened the way it always happened. A small mistake. A burned edge on the bread. A look she gave him that he didn't like. He waited until they were back in the small cabin at the edge of the ranch property. He waited until the door was closed. This time, when his fist came down, something inside her chest gave way, and her vision went white at the edges, and she slid down the wall and could not get up. He stood over her a moment, breathing hard. He said something she did not hear. Then he left. Maybe to the bunkhouse. Maybe to the cards. She lay on the floor of her own cabin, and she could not move, and she did not cry. She had used up her tears the night before. She lay there until the cold of the floor began to hurt her hip, and then she crawled, slow, on her hands and knees, to the bed. She pulled herself up onto it. She closed her eyes. She slept the sleep of the half-dead. She did not remember leaving the cabin. She did not remember walking to the kitchen. She remembered only the lamp she lit, and the coffee pot, and then the floor coming up to meet her face, and Pete Mallory shouting from somewhere very far away. She woke in a strange bed. The room was small and clean. Wood walls, a window with a quilt curtain, a smell of dried herbs and wood smoke. There was a woman sitting in a chair by the bed, an old woman, maybe 60, gray hair pulled back, hands rough with work, but folded in her lap with a kind of stillness Maren had never seen before. The woman looked at her with eyes the color of slate. "There you are," the woman said. "I was beginning to wonder, where am I?" "My house, outside Cheyenne Falls. My name is Cordelia Whitfield. People call me Della." "How did I get here?" "Wyatt Calloway brought you. 3 nights ago. You have been in and out since then. Mostly out." Maren tried to sit up. The pain in her side made the room go gray. Della put a hand on her shoulder, pushed her back down. The hand was strong. "Don't. You have got 3 broken ribs and a fever. You're going to lie there until I tell you otherwise." Maren let her head sink back into the pillow. Her thoughts were slow and thick. She watched Della's face for a long moment. "Why am I here? Why not in town? Why not the doctor?" Della smiled a little. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had seen too many things. "Because I am what passes for a doctor in this part of the territory. Because I was an army nurse for 4 years during the war, and I know broken ribs better than most men know their own names. And because Wyatt Calloway knows that if a doctor in town examines you, your husband will know where you are by sundown." Maren closed her eyes, opened them. "Where is Wyatt now?" "Outside, smoking. He has been here most of 3 days. He sleeps in the chair on the porch." Then Della leaned forward a little. Her voice dropped, and the words she said next were the words that started everything. "You should know something, child. The last time I had a woman in this bed with broken bones, Wyatt Calloway was outside on that same porch, and that woman did not live. Marin stared at her. Who? His wife. Her name was Hannah. The room was very quiet. Marin could hear her own pulse. Did he hurt her? Della looked at her a long moment. Then she shook her head, slow. That is not my story to tell. But I will tell you this. You are not going to die in this bed. Not on my watch, and not on his. Now drink this and sleep. She held out a cup. Marin drank. The taste was bitter. Sleep took her down before she could ask another question. When she woke again, it was night. The lamp was low. Della was gone from the chair, but there was a shape on the porch outside her window. A man's shape, sitting still, smoking, and she watched him through the gap in the quilt curtain for a long time before sleep took her again. She did not know yet what kind of man he was, but she was beginning to suspect that whatever Wyatt Calloway had done 6 years ago, in this same house, with another woman, in this same bed, was the reason he had carried her here on his horse, and the reason he had not slept. Wyatt did not come into the room while she healed. Della told her this was on purpose. A man, even a good man, did not sit at a sickbed of a married woman who was not his wife. There were things to think about. Things called reputation, called talk, called the long memory of small towns. She healed slow. Della fed her broth and bread and a tea that smelled like dirt, and made the pain in her ribs go quiet. They talked. Della had been a nurse at Antietam. She had held the hands of boys her own son's age while they died. She had walked across the field at sundown, after the third day looking for a friend's son, and she had not found him. She had come west after the war, because the East had too many ghosts. She had midwifed every baby born in Cheyenne Falls for the last 20 years. She had buried 2 husbands. She had no children left living. What happened to your son? Marin asked one afternoon. Cholera. He was 11. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, child. Be alive. That is what the dead want from us. There was no preacher in those words. There was only a woman who had buried a child and had decided what to do with the rest of her life. On the 5th day, Marin asked again about Hannah. Della was at the stove. She did not turn around. Wyatt will tell you when he is ready. It is not a thing for me to tell. Did she love him? Della stopped stirring, stood very still. Then she said, she loved him more than her own life. That was the trouble of it. Marin did not understand what that meant, but she understood that it meant something, and she let it be. That afternoon, the Reverend came. His name was Josiah Hooper, a man of 55, gray-bearded with kind eyes that had a worry in them at the corners. He had a Bible under his arm. He sat in Della's parlor and folded his hands. Mrs. Albright, I've come to ask you to consider returning to your husband. Marriage is a covenant before God. The breaking of it is not a small thing. The path of forgiveness is hard, but it is the path the Lord asks of us. She sat very still. She did not speak. Della spoke instead. Her voice was quiet. Reverend Hooper, do you remember the book of Malachi? Chapter 2, verse 16? The Reverend looked at her. He blinked. For the Lord, the God of Israel, saith that he hateth putting away. Yes. Read the rest of the verse. He hesitated. He opened his Bible. He read, For one covereth violence with his garment, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore take heed to your spirit, that ye deal not treacherously. Whose violence is the verse warning against, Reverend? He was silent. The husband's, Reverend. It is the husband whose violence is the offense against God, not the leaving, the hitting. Now you have a long ride back to town, and I think you should make it before dark. He stood up. He looked at Marin a long moment. He looked like a man who had come to deliver a sermon and was leaving with one instead. He nodded once. He put his hat on. He went out. Marin watched him ride away through the window. She turned to Della. Where did you learn that? Della went back to the stove. My second husband was a Methodist preacher. He had a library. I read it. All of it. Twice. She smiled, small. It is a useful thing, child, to know a man's book better than he does. On the sixth night, the trouble came in a shape Maren had not expected. She had gone to bed early. She woke to voices on the porch. Two men. One was Wyatt. The other voice she knew in her bones before her mind could name it. Silas. She got out of the bed slow, holding her ribs. She crossed to the window. She did not open it. She did not need to. The men were just outside. The wood was thin. She could hear every word. You think you can keep her here, Calloway. You think she is yours now. She is not mine. She is also not yours. She is my wife under God. You broke her ribs under God, too. The two things weigh different. There was a silence. And then Silas laughed. It was a low laugh. The kind of laugh a man laughs when he thinks he has just remembered something useful. You know, Silas said, I rode with a man last winter, down at the cattle yards in Cheyenne. Old man. Used to work for your daddy. 20 years on the Calloway Ranch. He was deep in the bottle and he wanted to tell somebody, and I was a man with a friendly face. He told me a story about your wife. Hannah, wasn't it? Wyatt did not answer. He told me where she was found. He told me how she was found. He told me about the letter. He told me what was in the letter. Maren could hear the porch boards creak. Somebody had shifted weight. She did not know which one. $500, Silas said. His voice had gone soft now, almost friendly. $500, and I ride out of Wyoming tomorrow. You never see me again. Maren stays. She is yours. I will sign whatever paper you want. I will go to Texas. I will go to Mexico. But if I do not have that money in my hand by sundown tomorrow, I will tell every soul in Cheyenne Falls how Hannah Calloway died and what her husband did and didn't do. The story I heard. The story your old hand told me. By Sunday it will be in the church. By Monday it will be in the town paper. By next month it will be in Denver. You will be the man who let his first wife die and stole a second one off another man. $500, Calloway. Cheap when you think about it. Maren had stopped breathing. For a long moment, neither man spoke. She could hear a dog somewhere far off. She could hear the wind in the cottonwood by the porch. Then Wyatt said, very quiet, no. Think about that, friend. No. You sure? I am sure. Then I will see you in town, Calloway. You and the whole damn town. She heard boots on the steps, a horse, hoofbeats moving away into the dark. Then nothing. Then the strike of a match on the porch rail as Wyatt lit a cigarette. She stood at the window a long time. She did not go back to bed. She did not know what she felt. There was fear in it. There was something else under the fear that she could not name yet. A man had been offered a way to keep her, and it had cost him only money. And he had said no. And the price of saying no was that the whole town would know the worst thing about him. She sat down on the floor by the window. She watched the red point of his cigarette in the dark, going bright when he drew on it, going dim when he didn't, until it was gone, and the porch was just dark, and somewhere very far away, a coyote called. The next morning at breakfast, Wyatt did not speak of it. He came in. He drank coffee. He told Della he would be in the south pasture. He went out. Maren watched him go. She could not eat. That afternoon she put on her dress. She pulled a shawl around her shoulders. She walked out of Della's house, slow, holding her ribs, and she walked down the road toward Cheyenne Falls. It was 3/4 of a mile. By the time she reached the edge of town, she was sweating, and her ribs were hot, and she had to stop twice and lean on a fence post. The second time she stopped, a woman driving a buckboard slowed and looked at her and started to speak, and then thought better of it and drove on. Maren watched the wagon go. She knew the woman by sight. The woman would tell her sister tonight that she had seen Maren Albright walking into town alone. The town would know by tomorrow that Maren Albright was up and walking. So be it. She was tired of being a woman the town only spoke about in whispers. She walked past the general store. She walked past the saloon. She walked to the white-clapboard church at the end of the main street. She pushed open the door. She went inside. The church was empty. It smelled of old varnish and beeswax. The afternoon sun came through the windows in slow yellow bars. Dust motes moved through the bars. Somewhere outside, a meadowlark called twice and stopped. She sat down in a pew near the back. She did not know why she had come. She did not pray. She just sat. She sat for an hour. She did not hear the door open. She did not hear his boots. She felt him before she saw him. Wyatt sat down 2 pews ahead of her. He did not turn around. He did not speak. He had taken his hat off. She could see the back of his head, the gray that had begun to thread through the brown above his ears, hair grown long over the collar. He needed it cut. They sat that way a long time, 20 minutes, half an hour. Outside, a wagon rattled past. A child laughed somewhere on the boardwalk. A bird flew through the rafters and back out again. The yellow bars of sun moved a little across the floor. She thought, sitting there in the empty pew, of all the things she had not done in her marriage. She had not laughed. She had not sung. She had not asked a question that mattered. She had not stood in an empty church for an hour with a quiet man and felt safe. Finally, without turning, Wyatt said, "Her name was Hannah. I want you to know that name from me, not from him." She did not answer. He had said all he was going to say. He stood up after a moment. He put his hat back on. He walked out of the church past her pew without looking down. The door closed behind him. She sat there until the bars of sun on the floor had moved all the way across the boards and faded into evening. Then she stood up, and she walked back to Della's, slow, in the cool of the dusk. That night, after supper, after Della had cleared the table, Marin said, "Tell me. I am ready to know." Della sat down across from her. She put her hands flat on the table. "All right, child. Then I will tell you." She told it slow. She told it without ornament. Hannah Calloway, born Hannah Hannigan, had died in January of 1881 in the loft of the Calloway barn, at the end of a length of rope she had thrown over a beam herself. She had been 27 years old. There had been a letter in the pocket of her dress. Hannah had not been beaten by Wyatt. Hannah had been beaten by her own brother, a man named Ezra Hannigan. He had raised her after their parents died, and he had never stopped raising her. And what he did to her in their father's house when she was a girl, he kept doing in her own husband's house when she was a grown woman. He came to visit. He came often. He found ways to be alone with her. Hannah had not told Wyatt straight. She had hinted. She had said things, and then taken them back. There had been bruises she explained away as horse kicks and falls. Wyatt had suspected. He had told himself again and again that a brother was a brother, that family was family, that a man did not put his hand into another family's business unless he was certain. He was waiting to be certain. He waited 5 years. The morning he found her in the barn, the letter said only this: "I am sorry. I could not tell you. I did not want you to be a man who killed my brother. I love you. Forgive me." He had not killed Ezra. He had not done anything. He had buried his wife, and he had carried that letter in his pocket for 6 years. Ezra Hannigan still lived in Nebraska, 80 miles to the east. Wyatt had not ridden those 80 miles. Not in 6 years. He had not gone because he knew what he would do, and he was afraid of being the man who did it. "He brought the letter here," Della said, "the day after the funeral. He gave it to me. He could not keep it in his own house. He has not asked for it back. It is in a tin box on the top shelf of my pantry. I have not opened it since the day he gave it to me. It is not mine to open. It is not anyone's to open. But I will tell you what is in it because you have a right to know what kind of man you have on your porch at night." Marin sat looking at her hands on the table. That is what Silas wanted to tell the town. Yes. The shape of it, anyway. He would have made it uglier. He would have said that Wyatt drove her to it. He would have said Wyatt knew and did nothing because he wanted to be free of her. He would have said many things, child, that are not true, and a few that are halfway true, and the halfway true ones are always the worst kind. And Wyatt said no. Wyatt said no. Marin nodded. Slow. Della, why did Hannah not just leave? Why not ride the 80 miles the other way? Della was quiet a long time before she answered. I have asked myself that question for 6 years. I do not have a good answer. I have only a partial one. She was raised by Ezra. She had no other family. He had told her every day of her life since she was a girl that no one would ever love her. She believed him. When Wyatt did love her, she did not believe it was real. She was waiting for him to find out the truth about her, whatever truth Ezra had told her she was, and one day, in her own mind, Wyatt was going to find out, and she was going to lose him, and she could not bear to lose him. So she made the choice for him. That is my partial answer, child. It is the best I have. Marin was crying. She had not noticed when she started. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I think I need to walk a little, Della. Outside. Take a coat. The night is cold. She walked out into the yard. Wyatt was at the fence again, looking at the hills in the moonlight. She crossed to him. She did not speak. She put her hand on top of his hand on the top rail of the fence. He did not look at her. He turned his hand over and closed his fingers around hers. They stood that way for a long time. It was the first time she had touched a man since her wedding day, and not been afraid of what would come after. The trouble Silas had promised came the next night. Not the way he had said it. He did not come for Wyatt. He came for her. It was past midnight. Marin was sleeping. Della was sleeping. Wyatt was on the porch chair with his rifle across his knees, where he had been each night since he had brought her here. What Marin did not know, what no one had told her, was that for 4 nights now, Tobias Reed had been sleeping in Della's barn. Wyatt had asked the boy. The boy had agreed without a word. He had been watching the road in shifts with Wyatt all that week. Silas came in on horseback. He was drunk. He had a pistol on his hip. He dismounted at the gate. He shouted Marin's name once into the dark. Tobias Reed walked out of the barn before Wyatt could come down off the porch. The boy had no weapon, just his hands. He stopped 20 feet from Silas. He said, in his quiet voice that carried in the cold air, Mr. Albright, you go on home now. There is nothing for you here. Silas laughed. It was an ugly sound. Boy, get out of my way. No, sir. Boy, you do not know what this is. I know what this is, Mr. Albright. I have known what this is since I was 12 years old. Something in the boy's voice must have stopped Silas. He stood there a moment, swaying on his feet, looking at the thin 19-year-old who was not moving and not afraid. Then he reached for the pistol on his hip. The pistol came up. Marin saw it from the window. She saw the muzzle flash before she heard the shot. The boy went down sideways into the dirt. And then there were 3 more sounds, one after the other. Wyatt's rifle from the porch, Della's shotgun from the door, and Silas Albright falling backward off his feet, his pistol skidding into the dust beside him. He was not dead. He was hit in the leg and the shoulder, and he was screaming. But he was not dead. Tobias was hit in the side. The bullet had gone through. He was alive. He looked up at Marin when she ran out into the yard, her bare feet on the cold ground, and he tried to smile, and he said, "Told you, ma'am. Some things you don't keep quiet about twice." She knelt beside him in the dirt. She put her hands over the wound, pressing, the way she had once seen a butcher's wife do when her husband cut his own hand on the block. The blood came up between her fingers warm. She kept pressing. "You hold on, Toby. You hold on now. Don't you dare." "I'm holding on, ma'am." "You hold on for your mama. You hear me? You hold on for your mama." The boy looked at her. His eyes were clear in the moonlight. "Yes, ma'am. I will hold on for her and for you." Della came running with a lamp and her bag. She pushed Marin aside and went to work. Wyatt had a rope around Silas already. Silas was screaming and cursing and bleeding into the dust of the gateway, and no one was paying him any mind at all. That was the night the town turned. Word travels fast in country like that. By morning, everyone in Cheyenne Falls knew that Silas Albright had ridden onto the Whitfield property in the dark with a loaded gun and shot a 19-year-old ranch hand. The story Silas had tried to tell, the story he had hoped to sell to Wyatt for $500, never got out of his mouth. You can call a woman names. You can suggest a married man took something that was not his. But you cannot shoot a boy in the dirt and keep your story. Silas was arrested that afternoon by the sheriff. He was held in the jail behind the town hall. The doctor came out from Cheyenne, a woman doctor named Eleanor Shaw, who had trained in Boston and had come west because she could not get a hospital in the east to hire her. She tended Tobias. She tended Marin's ribs. She wrote a letter to a lawyer in Cheyenne and sent it by the first stage. Tobias was going to live. The bullet had missed everything that mattered. He would be off his feet for 6 weeks. He would carry the limp the rest of his life. When the doctor told him this, he just nodded, like a man hearing the price of a horse he had already decided to buy. By the end of the week, papers had been filed. Petition for divorce. Charge of assault with intent to kill. The lawyer was a man named Herbert Gaines, 50-something, sharp-eyed, who had a daughter Marin's age, and who took the case at a quarter of his usual fee. Bernice Hooper came to see Marin 4 days after the shooting. The Reverend's wife was a small woman with iron in her spine. She sat in Della's parlor with her hands folded in her lap. She did not waste words. Mrs. Albright, I am going to ask the women of this town to put their names to a paper. The paper will say that the people of Cheyenne Falls stand with you in the matter of your husband. I will collect the names myself. I would like your permission to do so. Marin stared at her. Mrs. Hooper, your own husband told me to go back to Silas. My husband was wrong. He has begun to understand he was wrong. I am giving him time. In the meantime, I am not waiting on him. How many women will sign such a paper? I do not know. I will find out. May I have your permission? Yes. Bernice nodded once. She stood up. She put on her coat. At the door, she turned back. My mother, Mrs. Albright, my own mother. She lived for 31 years with a man who beat her bloody on the first Saturday of every month. I was the eldest of 6. I watched it. I have never told this to a single soul in this town, not even Josiah. I am telling you because I would like you to understand that this paper is not charity. It is overdue. She went out. Bernice Hooper got 47 names in 11 days. She got them by walking, in her good shoes, from house to house in Cheyenne Falls, sitting at kitchen tables, drinking coffee she did not want, asking each woman in turn to put her name on a piece of paper. Some of them said no. Most of them said yes. Many of them cried. 3 of them, after they had signed, asked Bernice if she could come back another day to talk about a thing of their own. She said yes to each of them. Her boots wore through that month. She bought new ones at the general store with her own egg money. She did not tell her husband what she had spent it on. She kept walking. Reverend Josiah Hooper came home one evening to find the petition on his kitchen table with all 47 names on it. He sat down. He read it. He read it twice. He looked at his wife across the table. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, Bernice, I have been a fool. Yes, Josiah. For how long? For most of our marriage, dear. But I love you anyway. And there is still time. Why did you not tell me? About your mother. Because, Josiah, for a long time, I was not sure you wanted to know. He looked at her. He looked at her a long time, and then he reached across the kitchen table, and he took her hand, and he held it. They sat that way a long time without speaking, which was the first conversation of any length they had ever had on the subject, and in some ways the longest. The following Sunday, Reverend Hooper rose in the pulpit, and for the first time in 30 years of preaching, he opened to the book of Malachi. He read chapter 2, verse 16. He read it twice. Then he preached for 40 minutes on the difference between a covenant and a chain. The pew where Bernice usually sat was the fullest pew that day. After the service, an old farmer named Cyrus Webb came up to the Reverend at the door. Webb was 70. His wife had died 20 years back. He took the Reverend's hand and held it. "Preacher, I had a sister once. I want you to know that I heard you today. I had a sister once, and I did not do for her what I should have done. She is 15 years in her grave. Today is the first day in 15 years I have walked out of this church and felt like she was walking with me. Thank you, preacher. That is all I came to say." He let go of the Reverend's hand. He walked out into the bright, cold sun. The Reverend stood in the doorway a long time. Bernice came up behind him and slipped her arm through his. They watched Cyrus Webb walk away down the dirt street toward his wagon. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. The hearing was 3 weeks later. Judge Aldous Penn presided. The courtroom in Cheyenne Falls was packed. The whole town came. Bernice Hooper sat in the front row with the 47 women of her petition behind her in 2 solid rows, hats on, hands folded. The judge looked at them when he entered. He looked a long moment. Then he looked at his papers. Tobias Reed testified. He came in on a cane. The doctor had said he should not be on his feet yet. He had got out of the bed anyway. His voice was quiet. The whole room leaned forward to hear him. He told the court what he had seen at the ranch, the bruises, the flinching, the look on Marin's face the morning he understood. He told the court about the night with the gun. He told the court about his own mother. He had not planned to. It came out of him. The court was very still while he spoke. When he stepped down, his hands were shaking. Marin reached out as he passed her chair and squeezed his arm. He did not look at her. He could not. Della testified. She gave the medical facts in the dry voice of an old nurse. 3 broken ribs, 2 old, 1 fresh. Bruising consistent with repeated blows from a closed fist. She had seen it many times during the war, and she knew it when she saw it. Dr. Eleanor Shaw testified to the same. Pete Mallory testified. Marcus testified. 2 more ranch hands testified. Wyatt testified. He told the court what he had seen in his own kitchen. He did not embellish. He did not look at Silas. When Silas's lawyer tried to suggest there was something improper between Wyatt and Marin, Wyatt looked the lawyer in the eye and said, "Mrs. Albright slept under Cordelia Whitfield's roof every night she has been off the ranch. I slept on Mrs. Whitfield's porch in a chair with my rifle. If you would like to suggest otherwise, sir, you are welcome to step outside this courtroom and do so where my hands are free." The lawyer did not suggest otherwise. Marin testified last. She had not slept the night before. She had sat at Della's table, and Della had put a cup of tea in front of her and had said, "Child, you have already won the hardest fight. The rest is just a room of men with papers. Walk into it and tell the truth. You have done the hard part. The hard part was deciding to live." In the courtroom, Marin stood up. She walked to the witness chair. She put her hand on the Bible. She swore to tell the truth. She sat. She looked once at Silas. He was looking at the floor. She looked at the judge. She told the story. She told it plain. She told it without crying, though there were tears on her face the whole time, and she did not bother to wipe them. She told the court about the second week of her marriage, when she had not understood what was happening because she had no template for it. She told them about the bread, about the roast, about the night she had heard her own rib break, and had thought, in a strange, clear way, that the sound was familiar, and only realized later that her mother had once broken kindling across her knee for the stove, and that was the sound she had heard in her own body. She told them about the kitchen, about Wyatt, about Tobias. She did not tell them about Hannah. That was not her story. That was Wyatt's story. He had told it to her, and she would carry it for him, and it would not be told in any courtroom. When she was done, she stepped down. The room did not move for a moment. Then Bernice Hooper, in the front row, stood up. And then the woman next to her stood up. And then the next, and the next, until all 47 women in the front rows were on their feet, in silence, looking at Marin as she walked back to her seat. The judge banged his gavel and called for order, but he did it gently, and there were tears in his eyes, though no one in that courtroom would have said so out loud, not even years later. The marriage was ordered dissolved on the grounds of cruelty. Silas Albright was bound over for trial on the charge of assault with intent to kill. The judge banged his gavel again. The 47 women in the front rows stood, all together, and walked out without a sound. Marin never forgot the sound of those 47 pairs of shoes on the wooden floor of the courthouse. It was not loud. It was the loudest thing she had ever heard. It should have been the end. It was not the end. 3 days after the hearing, Herbert Gaines came out to Della's house. He sat down at the kitchen table. He laid a letter in front of Marin. "Mrs. Albright, I have to tell you something, and I do not know how you will take it. Tell me, your husband was already married when he wed you, to a woman in Tennessee named Mary Albright. I have a letter from a clerk in Memphis confirming the records. There was no divorce. According to the state of Tennessee, Mary Albright is still his legal wife." The room was very quiet. Marin put her hand on the table to steady herself. "Then I was not." "You were not what?" "His wife. I was never his wife." "Legally, no. The marriage to you was void from the day it was performed. The court has already dissolved it on grounds of cruelty, but it was void on grounds of bigamy from the first. He had no right to marry you. You owed him nothing, not even the name." She sat for a long time looking at her hands. "What happened to her? To Mary?" Gaines hesitated. "That is what we need to find out. The clerk wrote that she disappeared 4 years ago, around the time Silas left Tennessee. The county prosecutor in Memphis would like very much to speak with him about that disappearance. There is a possibility, Mrs. Albright, that he killed her, that he is the kind of man who has done this twice." She thought about that. She thought about it for a long time. She thought about the morning she had married Silas, the little church in Nebraska, the borrowed dress, the flowers from a neighbor's yard, the way he had smiled at her when he said his vows. Easy, practiced. The smile of a man who had said those words to a woman before, and would have said them to one after, if his luck had held. She had been a story he was telling himself. She had been a chapter. "Mr. Gaines." "Yes, Mrs. Albright." "My name is not Mrs. Albright. It never was. I would like you, from this moment forward, to call me Miss Albright. Albright was my father's name. He was a kind man. He died of cholera when I was 16. I would like the name to be his again, and not the name of a man who never had a right to give it to me." Gaines looked at her a long moment. Then he closed his folder. Then he stood up. Then he tipped his head, just slightly, like a man making a small bow. "Miss Albright, of course." 2 more weeks went by. Then a second letter came. Mary Albright was alive. She had heard somehow the way news travels through churches and aunts and the women's networks that crossed states without anyone ever quite seeing how, that Silas was in jail in Wyoming. She had written to the sheriff in Memphis. She was living in Kentucky under another name. She had 2 small children, a boy of 5 and a girl of 3. She had run from Silas 4 years ago and had been hiding ever since. The county prosecutor in Memphis wanted to charge Silas with the attempted murder of Mary, on the strength of witnesses who had seen her beaten before she vanished. To make the charge stick, he needed Mary to come to court. He needed her face. He needed her name in the papers. If she came, Silas would likely hang. If she did not come, Silas would be convicted only on the assault against Tobias and the bigamy. He would serve perhaps 7 years. Then he would be a free man. Then he might come looking. For Marin, for Mary, for both. Herbert Gaines told Marin this in Della's kitchen on a cold morning in October. He laid the second letter on the table beside the first. "Mary has written to ask. She is afraid. She has built a life. She does not want to come, but she will come if you ask her to. She does not know me. She knows your name now. The story has reached Kentucky. She wrote that she would do whatever you asked her to do. She wrote that she felt she owed you that. Owed me. Her words, Miss Albright." Marin sat with the letter in her hand a long time. The kitchen ticked with the slow ticking of Della's clock. Outside, the first hard frost had come in the night. The world was white at the edges. "I want to go to her." Gaines blinked. "Miss Albright, that is a long journey, in your condition. My ribs are healed. The journey is mine to make. I do not want to write this in a letter. I want to look at her face. I want to look at her children, and then I will know what to do, she told Wyatt that night. He listened. He did not argue. He did not offer to come. He understood. He drove her to the station in Cheyenne 3 days later, and he stood on the platform until her train was out of sight. And then, Della told her later, he stood there a while longer. The journey took 4 days. She sat in the train and watched the country change. The plains gave way to the long brown hills of Nebraska. The hills gave way to the dark soil of Iowa, plowed in long, straight rows for the winter. The Mississippi crossed slow and brown beneath the trestle. Then the green hills of Kentucky, even in November, even with the leaves down, more green than she had ever seen. She had not been east of Nebraska in her life. She watched the country with her face against the cold glass and thought about what country could do, how it could shape a woman, how a woman from one place could not always understand a woman from another. She thought about Mary, somewhere ahead, getting ready to meet her, putting the children in clean clothes, brushing her hair, wondering what to say to a stranger who shared a name with her, and a husband, and a wound. She did not know what she would say either. She had not planned it. She did not believe in planning that kind of conversation. The words would come, or they would not. She arrived in a small Kentucky town in the rain. Mary Albright was waiting at the station. She was 28 years old. She had brown hair, plain features, and the same look around the eyes that Maren had seen in her own mirror for 8 months. The look of a woman who had survived something. She had her 2 children with her, a boy of 5 and a girl of 3. The boy looked at Maren with serious eyes. The girl hid in her mother's skirt. The 2 women stood facing each other on the platform. Neither moved, neither spoke. The rain dripped from the eaves of the station house. A porter pushed a cart of crates past them and apologized. Neither of them noticed. Then Mary said, very quiet, "I knew you would come." "How?" "Because I would have, if it had been the other way. I knew you would." They walked back to a small house on the edge of town. Mary made tea. They sat at the table and they did not speak for a long time. There were no words for what they were to each other. The same man had hurt them both. The same man had owned them. They were sisters of a kind no one ever wanted to be. The little girl came out from behind the skirt after a while. She walked, slow, around the table. She put her small hand on Maren's knee. She looked up. Maren bent down and lifted the child into her lap. The girl smelled like soap and milk. She put her head down against Maren's chest, the way a child does when it has decided about you. Maren had not held a child in her life. She had not known that the smell of a child's hair could undo her like that. She held the girl. She did not let her see her face for a moment. When she could speak, she said, "Mary, I came to tell you that you do not have to come." Mary's eyes filled. "Tell me again." "You do not have to come. I will tell the prosecutor that what we have is enough. He will believe me. Silas will get 7 years for what he did to Tobias. Maybe a little more for the bigamy. It is not enough. I know it is not enough. But you will not have to put your face in a Memphis courtroom. Your children will not have to know their father's name in a newspaper. You can stay where you are. You can keep being who you are now. He will come out one day. He will. And if he comes for you, you will write to me, and I will come, and so will every man on the Callaway Ranch, and so will Cordelia Whitfield with her shotgun. You are not alone now, Mary. Whatever else is true, that is true." Mary put her hand to her mouth. The little girl looked up at Maren, then at her mother, then back at Maren. The boy of 5 came over slow and stood beside his mother, and put his hand on her arm, the way a small man tries to comfort a woman. They sat that way a long time. Mary cried without sound. Maren held the girl. The boy held his mother. Maren stayed 3 days. She left Mary nearly all the money she had brought. She told Mary how to write to her in care of Cordelia Whitfield. No other names. On the 3rd evening, after the children had been put to bed, the 2 women sat at the kitchen table, and Mary told Maren about the last year of her marriage to Silas. Marin listened. She did not interrupt. She knew most of the story before Mary told it, the shape of it, the grammar of it. Some details were different, not many. When Mary was done, Marin reached across the table and took Mary's hand and held it. They sat that way a long time. Marin, Mary said, "Yes, there is a man here, in this town. He brings my boy fish on Saturdays. He has not asked anything of me, but I think he might, in time. Is he kind? I think so. I have not been very brave about looking. I am still learning to look at men without my hands going cold. Take your time, Mary. Some questions only get better the longer you hold them in your hand." Mary nodded. She wiped her face. She smiled, small. "I will tell you, when I know. I will write." "Write?" She kissed both children on the forehead at the station. She and Mary embraced once. They did not say goodbye. Some words you do not use for some people. She went home. The trial was in December. Marin testified. She said what needed to be said and not what did not. Silas Albright was convicted of assault with intent to kill and of bigamy. He was sentenced to 9 years in the territorial prison. He was led from the courtroom in chains. He did not look at her. She walked out of the courthouse into the bright, cold air, and she stood on the steps a long time. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel relieved. She felt very tired and very awake, and the air on her face was the cleanest air she had ever breathed. Wyatt was waiting for her at the bottom of the steps. He did not speak. He held out his arm. She took it. They walked. In January, Wyatt rode east. He did not tell her where he was going. He told only Della. He was gone 3 weeks. The first week, Marin did not worry. The second week, she did. The third week, she sat on the porch each evening at dusk, in the chair he had slept in for 3 nights when she was in Della's bed, and she watched the road from the east. He came back on a Thursday at sundown. The horse was lame in the off front, and he was leading it the last quarter mile. He was thinner. There was a tiredness in him that had not been there before. He came into Della's kitchen, and he sat down, and he said, "I went to Nebraska, to Hannah's family. I told them what Ezra had done. They did not want to believe me, but there was an aunt, Hannah's aunt. She had known. She had known for years. She had not been able to say it out loud until there was a man in the kitchen asking her the right question. She said it then. She said it loud. She backed me up. The county sheriff there opened a case. Ezra was arrested last week. He will go to trial in the spring." He took an envelope from his coat pocket. He set it on the table between them. The paper was old and creased. The letter inside it had been folded and unfolded many times. "This stays in your house now," he said, "or it gets burned, whichever you decide. I cannot keep it any more." Marin looked at the envelope. She did not open it. She put her hand over it. "I will keep it," she said. "Hannah deserves to be remembered by a woman who knows what she was." Wyatt did not answer. He put his face in his hands. His shoulders moved once, twice. He did not make a sound. Della got up and went out into the yard and stayed out there a long time. Marin put her hand on the back of his neck. She did not move it. She did not speak. She just kept it there. And after a while his breathing slowed, and his shoulders went still, and he reached up and put his hand over hers without lifting his head. That night was the first night she slept in the main house at the Callaway Ranch, in a room she chose for herself. Della had moved out to the ranch for the season to help her get settled. The talk in town had not stopped. The talk in town would not stop for years. They did not care about the talk. Winter came hard. Snow in November. By December the drifts were head-high in places along the fence lines. The ranch slowed to its winter rhythm. Most of the seasonal hands were gone south for the cold months. Only a half-dozen remained, plus Pete and Tobias and the old Mexican and Wyatt and now Marin and Della. They ate together at the long table. They worked through the short days. They sat around the stove in the front room of the main house in the evenings. Pete had a fiddle. Tobias was learning to play the harmonica from a book Della had ordered for him from St. Louis. The boy was not good at it yet. He would be in time. He had the patience. One evening in January, Maren was sitting at the kitchen table writing a letter when Wyatt came in from the cold. He stamped the snow off his boots. He took off his coat. He stood by the stove a minute, warming his hands. Then he turned around and looked at her. Maren. Yes, I want to ask you something. I want you to take your time about answering it. I am not asking for an answer tonight. I am not asking for an answer this month. I am asking only because if I do not say it out loud, I will keep moving around it like a horse around a hole in the ground. She set down her pen. Ask. I would like, in time, to marry you. I am not asking because the talk in town has not stopped, and a marriage would stop it. The talk does not bother me, and it does not bother you. I am asking because I would like, for whatever years are left to me, to live in the same house as the woman whose hand on the back of my neck stopped me from going to pieces in this kitchen 6 weeks ago. I would like to watch you grow old. I would like you to watch me. I would like that to be the shape of our days. I am not asking for an answer. I am only saying. She looked at him a long moment. Wyatt. Yes. I am going to need a year. All right. Maybe 2. All right. I do not yet know how to be a wife to anyone. The woman I tried to be a wife to first is dead. She died in a cabin at the edge of this ranch. I do not know who is standing in her place. I am still finding out. Take all the time you need. And Wyatt. Yes. Do not ask me again. I will tell you when I know. He nodded. He put his coat back on. He went out into the cold to do the last round of the night. She sat at the table with her pen in her hand and did not write anything for a long time. She was smiling. She did not know it. In the spring, the school was her idea. It started with one girl. The Hoopers' youngest niece, 12 years old, whose mother had died in the winter and whose father did not know what to do with a girl that age. Bernice asked Maren if she would mind, just for a few weeks, having the child come out to the ranch in the afternoons and sit in the kitchen and read out loud. The child was quiet. She would not be in the way. The child came. She read. Maren listened. After a week, the child had read all the books in the house, which was 3. Maren sent to Cheyenne for more. By the end of April, there were 4 girls. By the end of May, there were 11. They came in a wagon Pete drove from town and back each day. They sat at the long kitchen table. Maren taught them to read and to write and to do their sums. She taught them to bake bread. She taught them to set a broken finger. Della taught them, on Tuesdays, the names of the herbs and what the herbs were for. In June, Wyatt and Pete and Tobias built a small building on the edge of town, on a piece of land Wyatt had bought and put in Maren's name. The building had 2 rooms. It had a stove. It had windows on 3 sides. It opened in September. That fall, Maren added a Friday class. From a battered law book Herbert Gaines had given her, she taught the older girls the basic legal rights of a woman in the state of Wyoming. What property she could own, what contracts she could sign, what words she could say in a courtroom and have them count, what a woman could do if a man hurt her, and how to do it. The fathers grumbled. Some of them pulled their daughters out. Most of them did not. The mothers, quietly, in the way mothers had always done things in towns like that, made sure the daughters came back. Bernice Hooper taught the Friday class with her on alternate weeks. They were good in the room together. Bernice was sharper. Maren was patient. The girls loved them both. Letters from Mary came twice a year. They were never long. They were always signed only with the letter M. The little boy was learning his letters. The little girl was learning to ride a small horse her uncle had given her. The uncle was not real. There was no uncle. But there was a man in the town now, a widower of 40, who took the children fishing on Saturdays, and who had asked Mary if she would consider in time marrying him. Mary did not know yet what she would say. Maren wrote back and told her to take her time. In the spring of 1889, 2 years after the morning Maren had first sat at the table in Wyatt's kitchen with 2 cups of coffee between them, she went to find him. He was at the south fence repairing a length of wire a steer had broken through in the night. She walked the half-mile out across the new grass. The wind moved her skirt. The sky was the wide spring blue of high country in April. She came up behind him. He did not hear her. She had learned from him how to walk quiet. "Wyatt." He turned. "Yes." "My answer is yes, if you will still have it." He looked at her a long moment. Then he set the pliers down on the top of a fence post. He did not come to her. He did not move at all. He just looked at her, and she looked at him, and the wind moved between them. "Yes," he said, "I will have it." The ceremony was small. Reverend Hooper performed it in the white clapboard church at the end of the main street. He had come a long way. So had they all. Della stood as witness for Marin. Tobias stood as witness for Wyatt. The boy was 21 now. He walked with the limp, and he had grown out of his thin frame and into a quiet, broad-shouldered man who looked like he had always been there. He smiled at the wedding. It was the first time anyone could remember seeing him do it without working at it. Marin did not take Wyatt's name in the way other women did. She kept her own. Albright had been her father's name, and her father had been a kind man, and she was not going to lose the only thing of his she still carried because of what one bad man had done with it. Wyatt understood. Wyatt had stopped being surprised by anything she said. Cyrus Webb came to the wedding. He brought a wedding gift. It was a small wooden box, hand-carved, that he had made himself. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Marin opened the paper later that night. It said, in a careful old man's hand, "For your sister, whoever she is, wherever she is, from a brother who did not know in time." She put the paper back in the box. She put the box on the shelf in her room beside Hannah's letter and her mother's journal. She kept all three things together for the rest of her life. That summer, on a long, warm evening in July, Marin sat on the porch of the main house at the Calloway Ranch with the small leather book in her lap, the journal her mother had given her. The cover was worn smooth by now. She had carried it in her dress pocket on the train to Kentucky and back. She had carried it in her dress pocket the day she was married to Wyatt. She had not opened it in over a year. She opened it now. The last entry, the one she had written in the cabin while Silas was at the cards on a night that felt now like another woman's life, was still there in her own faded handwriting. "Today, I have forgotten how my mother used to laugh." She took the pen from the table beside her. She turned to a fresh page. She thought a long moment. And then she wrote, in the same careful German her mother had taught her when she was a small girl in Nebraska, the only line she had to write. "Today I have learned how to laugh." She closed the book. She set it on the table. She looked out across the long grass of the north pasture. The sun was going down. The light on the grass was the color of honey. Tobias was out in the near pasture, working a young horse on a long rein, the horse trotting in slow, steady circles around him, the boy talking to it the way he talked to all of them, low and patient. He had a way with horses that the older men talked about now in town. He would have his own land in a few years. Wyatt had already set aside the parcel. Wyatt came out of the house. He sat down in the chair beside her. He did not speak. He had learned over 2 years the kind of silence she liked to sit in. After a long time, she reached over and she took his hand. The wind moved through the grass. The horse trotted in its slow circle. The light on the hills went from honey to gold, to the deep red of a Wyoming evening. She had not been saved. That was the thing she understood now, sitting on the porch beside her husband. No one had saved her. She had been carried and tended and defended and loved, and all of those things had mattered, and none of them had been the thing. The thing had been hers. The yes she had said in a kitchen at 4:30 in the morning. The hand she had reached out and put on top of his on the rail of a fence. The 4-day train ride east to a stranger's kitchen in Kentucky. The choice to stay quiet for a woman she had never met. The choice to speak in a courtroom when speaking was the harder thing. The 2 years she had taken before saying yes again to a man. She had not been freed. She had freed herself. Wyatt had only opened the door. That, she thought, was what the dead wanted from us, to be alive, to be the one who chose. The sun went down. The porch grew dark. Inside the house, Della was lighting the lamps. The yellow light spilled out through the windows onto the boards of the porch. The first stars came out over the hills. From the bunkhouse, somebody was playing a harmonica. The boy was getting better. Marin Albright sat in the dark beside the man she had chosen, in the home she had chosen, in the life she had chosen, and she did not say a word. She did not need to. She was here. That was enough.